Yeah, we've also seen plenty of people within Canada who've been kept out of the labor market. And so as a fellow disabled person, Kevin, I was wondering if you might want to speak to the experiences of folks with disabilities.
Yeah, Jay, that's an interesting question coming out of COVID. The Institute of Work and Health tells us that there are more than 745,000 Canadians with disabilities who want to work, but because of a disability, they're being shunned out of the workforce. And, coming out of COVID, and we talk about this labor shortage issue that we're having, and certainly tapping into the market of folks who have a disability certainly gives your business a competitive advantage. Folks with disabilities, if they are given a job, according to the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, they're 72% more likely to remain on the job as a job retention, so you reduce your turnover in that rate. And, attendance is higher of folks with disabilities by 86%, and 92% of folks who have a disability that are infused into the workforce perform higher than their non-disabled counterparts when we look at things like job performance and elevating the prosperity of a workforce. So certainly you'll hear me use the term utilizing or tapping into this untapped labor market, and certainly if you want a competitive advantage as a company or a business owner, tapping into the disabled job market is certainly a great place to start, for sure. Yeah, and I'll simply add to that I think one of the things that employers have to do is start opening up the table of inclusion to folks with disabilities and other marginalized groups, and sort of pulling out a chair at the table of inclusion. So how do you do that? Like Leland said, you modify the job sort of recruitment process by possibly having targeted job fairs specifically for folks with disabilities. I was recently talking to the accessibility officer for the city of Long Beach, California, and the city had recently implemented their first job sort of fair or bank for folks with disabilities. And one of the things that she said was it provided us a diversified perspective on how to look at changing recruitment processes for city government, elevating folks with disabilities to leadership positions, making sure that they're a part of the hiring process to get a diversified perspective, and also having them in the room when you're putting together job postings, or the way that you're recruiting these individuals, because representation matters. And if you see yourself in a position of leadership, then it leads to a more diversified talent or selection pool, for sure.
So we've talked about hiring a little bit. But let's talk about the workforce overall. So we often talk about recruitment, and then forget about the retention piece. And so, Kevin, maybe you could start us off on, what do you think employers need to do to build an inclusive workforce? And what do you think they often forget or don't do, but they should?
Well, I think when it comes to retention, it all starts with developing the culture of developing your standards when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you have to, first of all, make the commitment to the process of inclusion. So what does that mean? It means, like we said, making sure your recruitment processes are diverse and fair, but once they're in the organization, it's also important to allow them to really demonstrate their prosperity. And what I mean by that is demonstrating the different ways that they can elevate your business. I used to be the regional ambassador for a project that some of you may know. It's called the Discoverability Network. And the Discoverability Network is the province of Ontario's first online job matching portal for individuals with disabilities and employers to get connected. And one of the slogans of the project was seize the opportunity to advance your business. So how do we do that? We have roundtable discussions on how we continue to make workplace inclusion a priority of our business. We make sure that people with disabilities are in the decisions that affect the entire organization. And I think when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's also important to remember as employers or business owners, it's also important to note that you want to make sure that if you can adjust the job responsibilities to fit the person instead of making the person always fit the job, I think that's a great place to start.
I think that's very wise, and the idea of that flexibility to actually create and lean into somebody's strengths.
Because then it creates that competitive advantage, and then you can celebrate the fact that you're diversity. So I call it the 3 capital C's, and that starts with creating a culture, and it also starts with celebrating the wins, and then it allows you to sort of begin the conversation. So it's about creating the culture, creating the conditions, and then celebrating the wins. So you can think of it in the 3 capital C's model that way as well. So can I just chime in and say that instead of recognizing specific companies, I'll just simply say that one of the things we had at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce was that you get more done with collaboration. So if you collaborate and if you're invested as an employer, as Mandy was saying earlier, it also allows you to sort of leverage the experience of the whole staff. And if you're more inclusive and invested in the process of rowing in the same boat of inclusion, a lot gets done faster because everyone's sort of rowing in a common goal, but it all starts with representation and making sure that leadership positions are diversely filled so that everyone is represented within a company. So it's about leveraging assets and also being invested in the process as well. So.
We have a virtual question from someone in the chat. Okay. So what are 3 actions any businesses that want to become more inclusive can implement as a first step within the workplace?
Perfect.
Who wants to go first? Go for it, Kevin. I think if you're a business, first of all, you have to make the commitment to wanting to do it. So that means that you have to, within your culture, you can make it a part of your organizational policy. And when you put on the end of a job posting, we're an equal opportunity employer. Well, put that into action by making sure that you recruit to the people that you're trying to entice to work for your company. And one thing I wanted to say before I turn it over to the other panelists is make sure when you're recruiting and even when you're interviewing the person that is going for the job, make sure that you sell positions to the person that you're wanting to fill, and sell the company to that person and start the conversation on how you can use this partnership as a way to leverage your competitive advantage as a company. So that's where I would start. And one final point I wanted to make on this issue too, especially for small and medium-sized businesses, is that there are organizations that we call service providers in the business in inclusive employment that work specifically with folks with disabilities and other marginalized groups to help them find and locate employment. So make sure you also leverage the community assets within your community, because they're all across the country and all across Ontario about those what we call service provider groups that help folks with disabilities work and find work as well. So leverage your community assets. Yeah, and I would simply say, before I tell you about the organization that I'm here to tell you about today, is I wanted to share just a little bit about my personal story. So I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia, cerebral palsy. Simply means that I don't have enough oxygen in my legs to walk normally. And you know, one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about this work is I found out at the age of 9, actually, that I wouldn't be able to walk for the duration of my life without assistance. And you know, I credit my middle school principal, Dr. Carol Crowley, for sort of changing the direction of my life, because, you know, I found out the day before I was starting my 4th year of elementary school, and after I had come back from the hospital, at Times Valley Children's Hospital, I went to Dr. Crowley's office and I had told her what the doctor had told myself and my parents the day before I started school. And she looked at me and she said, the only limitations on your life are the artificial ones that you place on yourself. So what I wanted to end with was, you have the opportunity to sort of lift the artificial expectation or perception by allowing yourself to think outside of the box and include folks with disabilities and other marginalized groups, and really start the conversation of acceptance in the workplace. You know, one of the mottos that I live my life by is that inclusion is the gateway to independence, and you can't be independent if you're not included. And, you know, from personal experience, I know what it's like to live on ODSP, or $865 a month through ODSP. So it's important for you to think outside your comfort zone and really use this as an opportunity to leverage the untapped market, as I said before, and really elevate the conversation around inclusion.
Thank you. Should go and...
Oh, sorry. One. I forgot the organization that I was supposed to tell you about. So I am here representing what's called the Discoverability Network, which is the province of Ontario's first online job matching portal. So if you're a job seeker with a disability, you go on the website, you create a profile, and you're instantly matched with employers that want to hire folks with disabilities. And obviously, if you're an employer, you're matched with job seekers who are looking for work. It's completely free for any of you across the country who want to use the website, even if you don't live in Ontario and you want to use the resources. It's a completely free resource, and it also provides you a roadmap to hiring, to the questions you can ask to make a job interview more inclusive, how to incorporate folks with disabilities into the workforce, would you hire them, and there are also training and success videos on there. So it's the Discoverability Network, and if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer any you might have. So, and I would simply say, embrace your empowerment to make a difference. You know, I talked earlier about pulling out a chair. at the table of inclusion, and you all have the power and the objective willpower to put all of that into action. So embrace the sense of empowerment that you have to make a meaningful difference.